Hi, everyone. This is Rich Berliner from CDIA, and I'm here today with Barry Goldstein. He is the CEO of Tillman Digital Cities, TDC, if you will, and I'm really pleased to have him with us on the podcast today. Barry, welcome. Thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me, Rich. Glad to be here.
Great. So, Barry, I always like to start off sort of with people's journey in this situation, and you've got an interesting one, and I wanted to explore that a little bit before we even get into any of the business stuff. So, tell me about you, how you got here, and what your journey's been like.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. It has been a very interesting journey to be the CEO here at TDC. I started my career out in consumer electronics for Panasonic, Japanese company, and I was the CIO there and had the opportunity to live overseas as well, and really learned a lot about how technology works for a company that is a distribution and manufacturing company. Uh, Fortunately, I was able to take that experience and I spent a number of years at Cisco Systems out on the West Coast. And I was running their consumer electronic, consumer packaged goods, retail strategy group. Um, and at the time, ironically, they didn't know what to do with hospitality because it was not an industry that was spending a lot on technology. They saw it as a cost. And so they gave me that, which really was the biggest change that happened to me personally in my career. I got connected at that time with Starwood, and a funny story about that is the work that we were doing back then in circa 2000 is we were trying to figure out how to make the internet work in a hotel because everyone, well, some people might remember the days of dial-up. And we had a product and we were trying to figure out who would buy it. And Starwood, who is a very progressive company under the leadership at that time of Barry Sternlicht, said, we'll absolutely want to figure out how to do it. We see it as a revenue opportunity, but also a customer experience. And so the story of my career really began there as I see it. Did a lot of work with Starwood. We put in a product which may or may not resonate for people called LRE, Long Range Ethernet. And we really changed the trajectory of how hotels thought about technology. And we put that in, we rolled it out into a number of hotels and really bringing a different thought process to Starwood and what they can now do both corporately at the hotels with all this technology, not just for the guest. And at that point, Barry Sternlicht convinced me, why don't I just join Starwood and become part of his organization, part of a group that was really trying to innovate the hospitality industry. And I did. I took that leap. I ended up at Starwood for many years, various roles involved in SPG and the sales organization, the technology teams, figured out how to roll out all this technology in a lot of the hotels, and it always was the bellwether. Albeit it was smaller than a Marriott, we were the company that everyone looked at. From there, I was fortunate to take on a role at Dolce Hotels, a small boutique firm owned by private equity. I was the number two in that role as the chief commercial officer, chief information officer. We sold ourselves to Wyndham, and I was the chief commercial officer there. We spun the company public, and all throughout that evolution, technology was part of it. Infrastructure, application. How do you make people better? How do you make the guest experience better? How do you make the employee experience better? Recruited to become a CEO at an amenity management company that was really focused on commercial real estate, hospitality, where we were delivering managed services, whether it's wellness or technology or meetings in those facilities. And then here I am at TDC as this industry has pivoted dramatically from carrier funded. The driver for TDC's connection to me was bring that expertise, help us take this amazing technology that we have around distributed antenna systems and help us figure out with clients in commercial real estate and hospitality, among other venues, on convincing them, quite frankly, why there's a need and ultimately they have to fund it. And that really brought me to this role here as the CEO for the past year and a half.
Right. So tell me about Tillman. I know somewhat about the company. I know there are multiple divisions. It seems to be a very successful company. But tell me about your division and how that fits in with the family of companies.
Yeah, so Tillman Digital Cities, TDC, is part of a family office, Tillman Global Holdings, which was formed in circa 2013. Tillman Global Holdings has a number of portfolio companies. So we are actually a self-sustaining company, but they have a tower company, which was one of their very first portfolio companies formed. At the time, the largest North American tower company, privately held in the US. They have a fiber company, they have an infrastructure company, they have an EV charging company, and then TDC, which was formed in 2020. We are a 3PO. We were created to really help venues become a neutral host facility, make sure that carriers, the three largest carriers, are available in buildings and venues. We do this through a managed service. We fund, we design, we operate, we manage, and we service. And so, for those venues and owners and real estate owners and hotels that are trying to figure out how you deploy this technology, we invest all the capex and then we manage it for them over a 10-year term. And it's been very, very successful. Our growth is really very much focused in hotels, in hospitality, in hospitals, and mixed use and commercial real estate.
Yep. So one of the interesting things you mentioned to me early on when we first met, and again, you are a major sponsor of the event that we're doing in Las Vegas, the hotbed of hospitality, I would think.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that you mentioned to me was that, when you talk to people, real estate people, hospitality people, all about NOI, ROI, net operating income, or return on invested capital, all of those things. And you kind of made a comment that, the hospitality and healthcare and hotels need to look at this as the having the ability to make money off this, not spend money necessarily. How does that fit into it? Because I think from what you said, you've got a take that's quite different than most people I talk to.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think many people see this type of investment of infrastructure overall, the convergence of not just cellular, but Wi-Fi, fiber, things that really power many, many solutions in a hotel. And they often see it as a cost. And the way we approach it is we see it more as an investment, a return on that investment, because there is the incredible ability to not only drive revenue, but make yourself more operationally efficient. And so, from a revenue perspective, if you think about that infrastructure and leveraging potentially digital signage outside your building, outside your hotel, Las Vegas is a great example. You drive down the Las Vegas Strip and you see so much signage. And the advent of this digital signage, which is powered by the infrastructure of not just 5G cellular, but fiber and a number of other technologies that we're investing in, it actually can be a very much revenue source for the hotel. They get a percentage of the advertisements that go on those signs through working with folks like ourselves and other types of third-party signage company. And I won't call it monumental revenue, but it's money that they could use to reinvest into other areas. And then if you think about this convergence, so you've got revenue that potentially come, the enhancement of maybe premium connectivity in the building that you can charge for. And then you think about the operational efficiencies when you look at non-converged infrastructure and that you're investing in silos and you look at upgrades and investment, that's very costly. And as you bring that together, it makes you much more efficient and operationally effective. And so between revenue and efficiency, and then you get value asset at the
Yeah.
end. So that's how we approach it.
So, and I think it's brilliant, frankly. We changed the name of our organization from the In-Building Wireless Association to Connected Digital Infrastructure Association for that very reason, that the converged networks
Sure.
are really what people want to talk about, especially in hospitality, healthcare, hospitals, and real estate. They're not interested in that stack, that standalone in-building wireless anymore. It's about that converged technology. And I think of Times Square. Think of all the signage and all of
Yeah.
that that's in Times Square and how those buildings make so much money off that advertising. But you can't do that as a standalone. It's got to be part of your converged networks. So how do you see the building of the future kind of bring that converged network setup into play in the world that you're living in and what you're trying to sell?
Yeah, it's a great point. And look, we're here in New York City, so you can't walk down the street without seeing, signage and infrastructure and people lighting up, all types of things. The building of the future, and a lot of people, use the term smart building. And, we like to talk about smart buildings more around the infrastructure. There's no doubt when you think about it, people immediately go, oh, the energy efficiency and lighting control and all these solutions, but without the what we consider the last mile, that infrastructure, the fiber, the Wi-Fi, the distributed antenna system, the low voltage cabling, to us, every building should have a single digital infrastructure where all these solutions can ride on it. And maybe later on in the conversation we'll talk about how AI benefits from that. But to us, without that in the building, done in a single converged network, you ultimately have silos, and it makes it very difficult to have the building of the future. So we immediately go to the infrastructure. A lot of people go to the cool solutions, but I could tell you those solutions don't work without that infrastructure.
I agree with you. And, my only comment to all that was amen. I think you're absolutely right. And so now take us through how AI fits with what you were leading into. A part of what we're doing at the show, the CDIA event in Las Vegas, the real estate and digital infrastructure event on September 1st in Las Vegas, which, thank you, by the way, you are a major sponsor of that event with us. But what we're focused on is a great deal of the aspects of AI and how it will fit together with this digital infrastructure piece, whether that's the new AI edge, as we've coined it, in bringing every building, every cell site into being a mini data center,
Yeah.
or using that, as you said, as a way to get the AI to that building. Talk me through that and how it works in your mind.
Yeah, well, thanks, Rich. And look, we are a sponsor because we believe in everything that you're talking about around CDIA. It's something that we're out there talking about, preaching, and obviously we're delivering it. So for us, look, AI is really about sharing a common infrastructure and then taking advantage of the aggregation of that data and then obviously making insights and decisions around that. So when we think about AI in a building and what that means and what makes a building intelligent, we first think about that data being generated through a common infrastructure. To kind of go a little bit tangential on that, imagine when you don't have that and you have a siloed environment. Every platform is behaving individually, and you have different Wi-Fi solutions, different infrastructure solutions. It then becomes the responsibility of the building to figure out how do you aggregate that and then leverage that data and make intelligent decisions. But
Yep.
for us, imagine if you had one infrastructure and the data rides on that, and you're able to look at HVAC, or you could look at the lighting, and you look at the control cameras, and you look at an event that crosses over. Think about the decisions you could then be able to make as a building when people are in, what the capacity looks like, if they see unusual security. All that data together makes it highly intelligent. They know when people are in or people are not. The hardest part about turning a building and leveraging it in what we call AI is the fact that things are just way too siloed, and it is a lot of work to bring it together.
Tower of Babel. Sounds like, we coined that right here, Barry. It
It
becomes
is.
a Tower of Babel for your building if you've got 15 different stacks. So it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, it sounds like there's a software component to this that has to tie all that data together with what you're talking about in this converged stack. That the case? Is that the right point that you're
Yeah, no,
trying to
there
make?
absolutely is. I mean, so you've obviously got software that operates each of these types of applications in a building, but people think the sensors, you put a sensor in a building, hopefully it is over a common infrastructure. But even with that, now you have to sit application software above that that are actually aggregating and making insight decisions around that, which is where the AI comes in. So absolutely, there are different layers. You've got your infrastructure, you got your data aggregation, and then you've got your software, you've got your physical sensors, and then you've got the software that ultimately brings it all together. And there are many different, look, let's be honest, there's many different players out there, sharing their solutions around that. And there's many that are good. And I think they're very much specific to what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. So, one of the interesting parts of this that, comes to mind when you're talking about this is we did an article. I don't know if you read our weekly newsletter, but we did an article that published yesterday is if you sell your building, who gets your data? And I think that that's an interesting twist on this is that you're creating now a converged set of data in your building with your sensors and your building management system and your in-building wireless network and your AI system and all of those things. Who owns that data?
That is a great question, right? I mean, now I'll put my hotel hat on, Rich. When you're a hotel brand, a large brand, and you're leveraging all your systems into all your hotels, you've got owners that often own those hotels. The brands don't do that. And there always was a very deep conversation. Who's the owner? Is it shared owner of the data? Can I use it for my loyalty programs? Or does the owner own the data and they have full responsibility and they can take advantage of it? And in that, we created some level of joint ownership. And I do think there's some level of that has to occur in all types of venues and buildings. We're 3PO, so we actually own a lot of the equipment when we come in, and we're
What's a 3PO, Barry? I think we should,
uh,
for the
we're
audience,
oh
the real
sorry,
estate folks,
yeah.
they don't know will know that.
So we're a third party operator or in a managed service. So when we come into a building, we actually own all the technology. We lease space in a commercial building. We put our technology in, the infrastructure in. Over that 10-year term, we are having the commercial owner pay us for that. At the end of that term, we either upgrade it and continue to manage it, or the owner can choose to take ownership back of that infrastructure. With that, the data that's available, we can surely aggregate it and provide intelligent solutions back for the ownership. So I've been always a big believer that in every instant, the owner has to have either individual or sole control of the data or joint sharing. Both of us own the data.
Interesting. It's great, I think, to have a person with expertise that's not sort of, guy like me who spent 40 years in the wireless business, but coming from a perspective that's on the outside of how the technology should be used in certain aspects. I think is a real advantage for you in looking at this very differently than those folks of us that come from steeped in this business and this is what we know. Every time, if every, what's the saying, if every problem is a nail, then the solution is always a hammer. You're looking at it from a different standpoint, having been inside the hospitality business. And I think that's very healthy in this situation because you can look and put yourself in the shoes of that guy you're sitting across from at the table and saying, hey, look, I was doing this job. I know what you're going through. So I think that's a real advantage here.
It is, and it was a little bit for me, a little bit of an eye opener. Obviously, the three large carriers in this industry, they really own a lot of the data, particularly over their spectrum. And it was somewhat unique when I tried to access or ask for access to some of that data. It's probably the best, and I was shared that, well, that's really proprietary and not available. which was surprising to me because coming from hospitality or commercial real estate, there was always a belief that there was co-ownership of the data, or in some cases the owner truly owned it. And I think what ultimately why it's important for the building owner or the hotel itself or the brand to have some level of ownership is because they're trying to delight the guest or the employee that is in their building. Because at the end of the day, all the work we're doing around infrastructure, yes, we're trying to make the building more functional, more executable, more premium in its nature. But you're at the end trying to solve for somebody who's in that building and you're trying to create and delight them. And without the ability to access and have some level of ownership, it's very hard to do.
Yep. No, and I love the concept of Converge. Maybe we should change the name of the organization again to Converge Digital Infrastructure Association. But I think Connected is going to have to do for now. But you've said it really well, Barry, and I really appreciate the thought process here. So I think we're going to wrap up with that because you've covered so much of what the approach is and why people should care about this. And I think it's been really helpful. So thank you for being with us today, Barry Goldstein from TDC. And this is Rich Berliner from the Connected Digital Infrastructure Association. Join us September 1st in Las Vegas at the Planet Hollywood, and you'll get to see Barry and his team and so many other folks, including NVIDIA, Nokia, Tillman again, and Helium, and a bunch of other players in the business. So join us then. Barry, again, thank you for being with me. And this is Rich Berliner saying thanks for watching.